Avowed is stirring up controversy in the community. The latest RPG from Obsidian Entertainment comes with some serious expectations. After all, this is the studio behind Outer Worlds, Fallout New Vegas, and Pillars of Eternity. But something strange is happening with the reviews. While some critics are calling it the next great RPG, others, like IGN and GameSpot, are giving it surprisingly low scores. Well, IGN is back at it again with the 7 out of 10 score, but that's a topic for another video. Obsidian has always been known for two things: making combat fun and creating deep stories where your choices actually matter. They're the masters of letting players talk their way out of fights or turn enemies against each other. But after spending 40 hours with Avowed, there's something unusual going on here that we need to talk about. The combat feels different from anything they've done before, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. The story tries to set up something special. You're playing as a godlike, someone who is selected by a god to play an important role in humanity. These special people get unique powers, talents, and strengths. But here's the twist: you don't know which god picked you. There are different gods who provide different powers. And because our main character doesn't know who blessed him, he lacks a clear direction. The king sees this as an opportunity and sends him to the Living Lands to investigate the Dream Scourge. The Dream Scourge is a strange infection that's spreading. The scourge is spreading through nightmares. It is taking over everything from people to plants and animals. Before we talk about the gameplay and story, let me talk about the performance for a second. I've seen some people complain about the performance and bugs in this game. While the game isn't perfect, I experienced only one crash during my 40-hour playthrough. However, there was a more annoying issue for me. I like to set up my personal keybinds for controller and keyboard, and whenever I closed and reopened the game, the keybinds would revert to their default settings. I have already given feedback about this to the studio. On a more positive note, the game offers a lot of customization options. The best customization is that you can play in first or third person, but the third person is a little bit wonky at times. Overall, I had a good time with no major issues. When it comes to the difficulty, I was very surprised. I've spent some time in the normal and in the hardest difficulty. The changes mostly affect damage and health, but the health changes are relatively minimal. What really changes is the damage done and how enemies behave. Nothing crazy, but noticeable. I love to see that the developers understand how to set up the difficulties. Way too many games crank up the health of the enemies to a point where it's just tedious and annoying to kill them. On Path of the Damned, enemies are much more aggressive, while not insanely tanky. If you just want to enjoy the story, there is a difficulty called Story. On this difficulty, everything dies quickly and deals minimal damage to you. Now let's dive into the character creation. You might be surprised by the choices you have. Some even have an impact on your gameplay experience. The character creation has both cool and restrictive elements. Your character is always the godlike of an unknown deity, with fungal growths on their face if you want them. However, you can't pick more interesting races, as your character is an Imperial envoy from the Empire, which is primarily human and elf. But the real RPG elements come into play with your background and starting attributes. Your background is the most important decision you'll make in terms of story and narrative. Each background gives you different dialogue options and alternative quest outcomes. If you want to see everything Avowed has to offer, you'd have to play through it multiple times and explore these different options. Now let's dive into the progression system. As you level up, you'll gain attribute points and skill points to spend on the game's skill trees. When it comes to skills, you can put your skill points into one of 3 different skill trees: Fighter, Ranger, or Wizard. There's also a godlike tree that represents your powers as a godlike, with passive and active abilities. The abilities are even connected to the story and your choices throughout the game. The Fighter tree feels a bit shallow compared to the Ranger and Wizard. Ranger and Wizard offer more unique and flashy options. When it comes to the gear, there are various armor slots. The only thing we can't wear are helmets. You can even transmog your armor set to maintain a desired appearance, a feature that I always love to see in RPGs. Now let's dive into the gameplay and world design. The game uses several explorable zones. Each zone is fairly large and designed with different florals and interesting architecture. Each zone offers plenty of quests, exploration opportunities, and lore. The living lands are meant to be lush, overgrown, and full of vibrant colors. The zones are also very vertical, allowing you to climb structures and find rewards for your efforts. This exploration feels rewarding. By exploring the area, you will learn more about the lore and you will find lots of loot. However, the game does have its limits and you can't just kill everyone you meet. In their previous game, The Outer Worlds, you could literally eradicate the entire village.
There we go. It just makes no sense. The narrative is just all over the place.
As for companions and camps, you'll find campsites throughout the zones. Camps serve as points to talk to your companions, upgrade gear, rest, and cook meals. Your companions are not optional. You will have up to 2 of them with you at a time. They provide helpful explanations about the world and have their own personal stories. While they won't leave you during normal gameplay, there's a point in the story where you can potentially lose them. Having this option is definitely interesting. Exploration, questing, and the overall world design are enjoyable. The developers didn't try to make an over-the-top, gigantic open world like Ubisoft nowadays. The setting might not be for everyone, but objectively speaking, they did a good job with it. However, a big point of criticism is that you'll find yourself fighting the same enemies quite often. This was a problem in Dragon's Dogma 2 as well, just to mention a recent RPG with the same problem. There's a decent amount of enemy variety, but you'll mostly encounter 2 types of enemies, which can be a little frustrating at times. Now that we've covered the world design and exploration, let's dive into the combat system of Avowed, which has undergone an interesting transformation from the games they've published in the past. There are plenty of combat styles to play with. You can experiment with a battle mage, stealth archer, or even a small summoner build. Each build feels unique to one another. There are 2 weapon sets you can swap between. Each hand can be equipped with various weapons like spears, bows, pistols, and more. The game offers a variety of ways to play, but be aware that a basic melee character might be a bit boring due to the lack of interesting options in its skill tree. I personally find it a bit frustrating because I'm a huge fan of broadswords and katanas. Another interesting gameplay and combat option is stealth. You can play a stealth build, but committing to stealth is probably not a good idea. The game is not really designed to be played in stealth. Avowed is shining when it comes to magical combat. The mage tree is very interesting. The grimoire system allows you to learn spells from grimoire weapons. You can cast upgraded versions of spells if you invested skill points. Combining these spells with abilities from other trees offers diverse gameplay options. Your enjoyment will largely depend on your understanding of the system. If you gear up properly and find a playstyle that represents the character you're trying to create, it's quite likely that the combat will be fun for you. Overall, the combat system is enjoyable and offers a good experience. Alright, so where are all the negatives that people have pushed for weeks? I got the answer. It was a fear of being disappointed combined with clickbaiting for views. It's not a game of the year, neither is it a bad game. On the positive side, I really enjoyed the choice and consequences. I like to see the results of my decisions affecting the living lands and the wider lore of the world. The world has a good size and it is fully explorable. The exploration is rewarding to a point where it makes sense to actually explore the region. Replayability seemed well made. However, there are some negatives. Melee combat is quite lackluster. If you want to play a melee-only character, you will not have a good time. Beyond those bigger issues, there are some smaller quality-of-life problems. Earlier I said that the game has good choices and good replayability. Still, it's quite lacking and too flat for many people. Do not expect a deep and mature story when playing this game. It's decent. Despite these issues, I had a good time with Avowed. And here's a short reminder. Don't just blindly listen to these controversy-stirring people on the internet. There are people who try everything in their power to create drama and intrigue for attention. Before you hate on a game or jump on the hate wagon, watch a review of a person who analyzes the game properly. I have my opinions on the movement as well, but I'm not attacking a developer before I've tested the game.